Hey, startup founders, early stage entrepreneurs, and impact leaders. Welcome to another episode of the Founder Underground podcast. I am Ian Scott Cohen, your host today, and I'm diving into one of my favorite books as part of our book breakdown segments. This one is called The Power of Moments, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding up the book. It's a pretty cool cover. It's got a nice lightning in a bottle. And it is by Chip and Dan Heath. So Chip and Dan Heath are pretty fantastic in my opinion. They have a lot of different books out. The main one that most people have probably heard of, or I should say the one that more people may have heard of, is called Made to Stick. And that one is really about why some ideas survive and why others don't, and how messages really stick in people's minds. But this book, which I read recently, and I want to double check when it was actually written. I think it was written just a few years ago, but this book is a little bit different. Yeah, so this is written in 2017, but this is what it's about. So founders, we all know that the moments when things just click, right? So whether it's a product launch that exceeds people's expectations, a conversation that sparks clarity, or maybe a surprise customer review that really just makes you smile and brings it all together. But the question is, what if you didn't have to leave those moments up to chance? What if you could intentionally create defining, memorable moments that strengthen your team, that delight your customers, and leave a lasting impression on them and your market? What if you could actually design those? In today's episode, I'm going to walk through Chip and Dan Heath's framework from the book, The Power of Moments, which is all about that. It's all about how do you create memorable experiences and why certain experiences have an extraordinary impact on the people who are a part of them. And so I'm going to also incorporate how you can use these principles, and there are 4 of them, how you can use these principles to design better products, better services, and better experiences, both for your customers and your team and yourself. Okay, so there's a lot to get through in this, but I'm telling you, this is maybe one of the best books I've read that in terms of how it can impact your thinking around your product, your service, your program, whatever it may be. So big picture, there are 4 principles as part of this framework, 4 ways that, I guess, principles or characteristics or sort of I don't even know the right word for them, but 4 pillars of this framework that can create memorable experiences. And the authors say that usually, you'll have 2 of these, but all 4 is rare. And so what we're going to work through is, the first is elevation. So how to create moments that really rise above the everyday. The second pillar is insight. So creating aha moments that can really reshape people's behavior and spark realization. So we got elevation to kind of raise the experience above the day-to-day. Insight, these are moments that spark realizations. Pride, so pride moments commemorate achievement and courage. They make people feel valued and capable. And then lastly, connection. So this is where you use the shared experiences to really strengthen and deepen relationships and build a sense of community, even amongst complete strangers. And so those are the 4 pillars that I'm going to walk through. I'm going to explain each of them, share an example or 2 from the book, and then I'm going to give you some ideas about how you can use them for both your team and your product and your services. So here we go. Let's start with elevation. So just a simple definition. Elevation and elevated moments, they rise above the everyday. And it's creating joy, delight, and engagement. So they provoke feelings of amazement, feelings of pride or excitement by boosting sensory appeal. That's going to be key part number 1. Raising the stakes is key part number 2 here. And breaking the script. And so that is surprising people in meaningful ways. All right, so I'm going to give you an example, and then we'll go through the core elements of it. So a first example that he gives in the book is there was a family vacationing at the Ritz-Carlton. I don't remember where, but so their child, they had a young child who brought a giraffe stuffed animal with him. And when the family left the hotel for the end of their trip, the child accidentally left their giraffe behind. And so as anybody who has young children or young nieces and nephews knows, sometimes these can be very, very traumatic experiences where they just throw a fit and you got to get that toy back. And so the parents reached out to the Ritz-Carlton and, let them know, it's like, hey, have you found this giraffe? Our son is distraught. If there's any way that we can come back and get it, you guys can send it to us, that'd be great. Okay. So normally staff might just say, we didn't find it, or, maybe they'll mail it back to you, best case scenario. This is where the Ritz-Carlton staff actually went above and beyond and really elevated what would be a normal interaction between customer service and, in this case, a hotel customer. And they turned it into something very, very memorable for this family and something that they could share beyond that. So instead of just mailing this thing back, the staff found it, and a member of the staff decided to, in their response, they included a full photo shoot of the giraffe, quote unquote, on vacation. So they went around, took the giraffe to different parts of the hotel and the different parts of the guest experience, the spa, the gym, the pool, and they took pictures of the giraffe sort of enjoying himself. And they turned the simple lost item recovery into a really legendary customer experience, because when they sent it back, they gave this slideshow to the family, and the child was like, oh my God, my buddy is having an amazing time, and he'll be back soon. And so it demonstrates how going beyond expectations and adding an element of surprise can really transform a routine task into an extraordinary experience that leaves that lasting impression that you're oftentimes going for with your product or your service. So here are the core elements of elevation. The first is boosting sensory appeal. And we're talking about sensory, like our senses, your physical senses. So you're trying to engage multiple senses because they can make moments more powerful. Whether it's through taste or sound or sight, sensory experience is more memorable. So, think about ways to get your team or get your customer outside of their normal comfort zone or outside of their physical environment. This is especially great for teams when you're trying to kind of break things up. The second core element of elevation after boosting sensory appeal is raising the stakes. And this one I really like. So raising the stakes, it's just, this idea that high stakes make moments more intense, right? When something's on the line, it makes it more intense. Your adrenaline starts pumping, and it becomes something where you have to really engage and be fully present. So introducing a sense of urgency or challenge really heightens emotional investment. And so one example he gives on that front, raising the stakes, is about these two teachers who were at a school. One of them, I think, was a history teacher. The other one was a biology teacher. And they both were teaching different elements of their subjects. And so the theory of human nature came up. I think it was in philosophy or whatever. They wanted to take these ideas of making arguments and backing them up with evidence, which I think was from the English class, and from history, they wanted to take this idea of like, what is true human nature? Is it humans are social animals, or humans are, individuals, and the world's a dark place? If you've read any sort of basic philosophy and history, you know that there's all kinds of perspectives on human nature. Anyways, these two teachers kept running, they wanted to do something different. And so what they decided to do was combine their projects, because they shared a lot of the same students, and they had the students actually put on trial human nature. And so they essentially had two sides, and each side, one was arguing for human nature to be one way, the other was arguing for it to be the other way. And so it was really engaging and interactive. But what the teachers did to raise the stakes was that they actually made it a trial, and they took the kids. So they actually did all three of these elevation things. So first, to boost sensory appeal, for the final trial, they took the kids to an actual courtroom, and they had them do their entire court case in the courtroom. To raise the stakes, they actually brought in real witnesses and a jury. So these were, big personalities from the school. So the principal was a witness, and I think the captain of the football team was on the jury, and other teachers were on the jury. And so they brought in more people to kind of break the script here, which is going to be our third element, and surprise the students. And also, and this is key, especially if you're working with kids, they said there will be a winner. Now, in today's world of participation trophies and not wanting to traumatize children, a lot of times we avoid kind of winners and losers types of things. But Chip and Dan Heath's point here was that having actual stakes, having something to compete for, brings the moment to life makes it more intense. And we all know that, long term, the kids aren't going to care so much about winning and losing, or it's at least not going to have that huge of an impact if they lose. But it makes them more engaged and gets them to buy in. And so it was a really powerful moment, and it incorporated all these elements. So again, we're talking about how to elevate moments. Elevation is the first pillar of creating memorable moments. And there are three core elements of elevation. So one is that boosting sensory appeal. So adding in different things. So it could be adding music into your program or taking it to a different location. Raising the stakes. So actually introducing a sense of urgency or a challenge that heightens that emotional investment. And then the third one is breaking the script. So these are moments that deviate from the norm and they leave a lasting impression. People remember surprises that defy their expectations. And so, for instance, I think one of the examples in the book for the breaking the script was there was a leadership retreat for this company, and 5 minutes in, they were all seated in front of like a projector, as you might expect. And then after about 5 minutes, the boss actually said, okay, everybody pick up your stuff. Like we're going outside. And they went to some sort of ropes course or something. And he turned it into a whole outdoor excursion, and it became a very memorable moment for everybody. And so they did not know that was coming. It completely broke the script because the script is their expectations, right? And so to deviate from those norms and breaking that script, defying expectations can really create a moment for someone, because all of a sudden their brain has to click in. The thing is, when we get into moments that are predictable, where we have expectations, and our brain is always trying to do that, then it can make it so that the person is not fully present. They can kind of skate through the experience, only half engaged. But if you put them in a situation that they're not expecting and not used to, it forces them to be a little bit more present and engaged, which can create a memorable moment. All right, so a few more elements of the elevation piece, and that'll give you some ideas of how to apply this. So one thing they emphasize is the importance of peaks, pits, and endings. So they've done some research, and they found that most people remember experiences by their peak moments. So that's either the high peaks or the low peaks, which we'll call pits. And so if they have a really amazing peak moment, that's probably what they're going to remember. And that's why elevation is so critical, or can be so powerful. You don't necessarily have to have it, but it's one way to create a memorable moment. Same idea, though, works in the opposite direction. People tend to remember their worst moments too, the pits. And so if there's a particularly poor part of your experience or your product, your service, you got to be wary of that, because that can be the one thing that stands out, even if everything else was great. And then they also remember how things end. And so closing out an experience, whether it's a program or logging out of a product or the first onboarding experience, whatever it is, how you end that experience is really important, because that's another thing that people are going to remember. Too often we kind of focus so much on the meat of something and don't think about how to tie it up into a bow nicely at the end. So you want to design your product or service so that its highest point, a delightful feature or maybe a major milestone somebody achieves, stands out and leaves that lasting positive impression. Similarly, ensure that experiences conclude on a really strong and positive note so you can kind of maximize retention. All right, so we're talking about pillar one. Again, we're talking about The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, how to create memorable experiences. Pillar one is around elevation, and elevation means it consists of boosting sensory appeal, raising the stakes of an experience, and breaking the script of the experience. And now here are a few ideas about how you can apply this to your team and to your products and services. So I'll start with the products and services part. So you can think about adding sort of delight through design. And a lot of people talk about this these days, but so your product could include hidden features maybe that make the user smile, like fun messages or rewards when they achieve milestones. One example they give in the book, and I keep forgetting what this hotel is called, but it's really, really great. Let me just look it up real quick to make sure that I want to make sure I reference it properly. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so there's a hotel that they reference called the Magic Castle Hotel. I think it's out in California. Yeah, Los Angeles. And the Magic Castle Hotel is famous because it's one of like 3 hotels that has like a perfect reviews rating. But it's not like a 5-star hotel. It apparently it's fairly outdated. It's not really luxury or premium. It's actually a very like common person hotel. But what stands out for them is some of the little things that they've done. And so this is a great example of elevating something, elevating a simple thing, simple experience. And so they have this thing at this Magic Castle Hotel called the Popsicle Hotline. And so apparently when you're out at the pool, there is a phone that is labeled Popsicle Hotline. You pick up the phone, the person answers immediately and asks you what flavor do you want. I think there are like 3 flavors. And that's it. You order a popsicle. It is a popsicle hotline. Now, it doesn't stop there. First off, the popsicle is hand delivered to you on a silver platter, literally a silver tray. It's like very fancy, but it's just a popsicle at the end of the day. The thing, though, is that this experience of picking up a phone, ordering a popsicle, and having it hand delivered to you at the pool and not having to pay for it, so it's completely free, all right? That is such a memorable experience for the kids, for the parents. It's so different. It's so unexpected. And it costs the hotel almost nothing. I mean, popsicles are so cheap, and this is such huge brand value and experience value. And, you know, the hotel does a few other things like this, but the popsicle example is great. So you could add delight through some sort of design, whether it's the experience or hidden features, things like that. You can also raise the stakes through things like gamification. So you can create time-sensitive challenges within your product that encourage action. So maybe limited time bonuses or something for completing tasks. If you're running a program, you can insert competition, of course. You can also insert prizes or bring in, you know, if you bring in a guest, maybe don't share that the guest is coming in and have actual like judging going on or things like that, just to raise the stakes and bring the people more into the moment. It's very, again, our brains are wired such that we want to kind of relax and you know, build the world of expectations around us so that we feel safe, secure, and we know what's expected. The challenge is that doesn't create for memorable moments. And so your challenge is to break that. And so the last idea here for your products and services for breaking the script could be a strategic surprise of sorts. So you could send unexpected rewards to loyal customers, such as a surprise discount code or personalized thank you notes. Imagine an online course that maybe offers a free one-to-one coaching session once students complete 50% of the course. But this is not something that they publicized or promised. It's something that's kind of out of the blue. For my tech company, one thing we did early on was we were surveying a really big customer and all these new teachers. And one of the teachers who actually lived in our area, their laptop broke. And this is a key moment. I mean, teacher like lives on their laptops. They got to create all this materials. And so what we did was we just ended up buying them a new laptop. We didn't ask them and we just delivered it to them. And, you know, it was a modest expense for us, but it just created such a memorable moment for them. And it was a great thing to do that it was super easy, you know, and you know, we all know the feeling of being in like crisis situations. And so anytime somebody can help you and it's unexpected, it can just be so powerful. So those are a few examples. Now, for your team, something you can do is again, we're talking about elevation. You could celebrate milestones. Seems kind of obvious, but a lot of times we forget to do that, or we just do it in a really nonchalant way. So, you know, break the monotony of working with surprise team celebrations. You know, for example, celebrate the first product prototype, you know, with a fun, unexpected outing or event. You know, turn a mundane situation into a unique experience is basically the goal here. You can also surprise people with recognition. So publicly highlight and reward individual contributions, maybe in ways that the team doesn't expect. And again, breaking expectations is a huge part of this. And then you could also integrate surprise moments into maybe team meetings, or, you know, other routine things such as, you know, doing like a 5-minute sharing session where each person highlights a recent success or a hidden talent that they might have. Things that kind of break up the experience. I was a part of a program once where we would do a hidden talent every Friday, and you just learn so much about people and you remember those moments because they're unique, they're different, and they totally break expectations. So, okay, that is pillar 1. And I'll try to go through the rest of these pillars a little bit faster, but it's just really good stuff. So feel free to stop and replay this thing. All right, so pillar 1 was elevation, where you have to boost sensory appeal, raise the stakes, break the script. All right, pillar 2, and let me get a quick spell of water here. Okay, pillar 2 is insight. So these are creating aha moments. What we're really talking about is insight moments. They spark realizations that reframe how we understand ourselves or the world around us. All right. This is literally what we're talking about. Aha moments, paradigm shifts in your way of thinking. And you probably can think back to a few that you've had. And the question is, what sparked those? Why are certain moments like the straw that breaks the camel's back, and all of a sudden you see everything differently? They often involve, and this is Chip and Dan Heath's words, they often involve, quote unquote, tripping over the truth. So when people experience the truth so clearly that it changes their perspective. And we all probably have been in those situations where people have been telling you something for a long time and it doesn't compute to you, and you're just like, no, I don't believe that, or that's not the truth. And then eventually one day it just clicks, and everything that you once thought you see in a different light. And so that's really the key to creating that moment for a person that is not yourself, is that you need to really set them up. And so there are 3 core elements to insight. The first is clarity and compression. So insights are powerful because they happen quickly and they leave this lasting impression. Tripping over the truth is the second core element of insight. So this happens when people discover a reality that they had been ignoring or maybe didn't fully grasp until the moment. And then lastly is stretching beyond comfort. So by pushing ourselves or others into new situations, we set the stage for this self-discovery. So let me give you a couple of examples of creating a memorable moment through insight. So in the book, they talk about this quote unquote dream exercise that this university did with their professors. And it highlights how little time the professors actually were spending on their most important goals. The exercise compressed time and forced participants to confront the reality of their time allocation. So basically, they asked each professor kind of what their dreams were, what their most important goals to their students were, and then they had them go back and look at their curriculum and ask themselves, okay, well, does your curriculum get you to the most important goals that you have? And universally, they're all like, no. And that is one of the reasons why they find teaching so unfulfilling. But for some reason, people kind of get dragged into doing things in different ways, not because they think they'll be better, but because they think that they are what's expected. And so for the professors, once they saw clearly that, hey, your curriculum, your lecture topics, and your assignments, they don't align to what your actual important goals are, then it forced them to do a dramatic shift. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, I didn't even think about this. Professors are so, in the work, doing the day-to-day stuff, trying to get through the semester. They don't realize that they're doing a bunch of things they don't want to be doing, which bleeds into their students' experience too. Another example, which is a little more vivid, was from this guy Kamal Carr's work in global health. And so this was, I forget where it was, but it was in a small village where basically there was no running water and no plumbing. And then they built toilets for this small village. And yet the citizens of the village still were not using the new facilities, the new toilets. And the question was, okay, why are they not doing this? And there's a lot of behavioral stuff, right? This is about changing and reshaping behavior. And so what Carr did was, instead of explaining to them how the toilets work and, why they're good, he actually walked through the village with them. And there's a bunch of different places in this village where people would just openly defecate. And that might sound crazy, but there are places where if you don't have indoor plumbing and culture is a little bit different, this happens. It's not sanitary. It causes a lot of health problems. And so he literally walked with the villagers to these different spots where people openly defecated, and everybody's disgusted by them, and they're sitting there kind of laughing because they know that this is gross. But what he did was he said, okay, well, you see these flies here, and there are obviously flies around landing on the poop and stuff. He's like, well, do you think when the fly lands in that and then leaves that he doesn't pull any of that poop with him? And everybody in the village is like, oh, of course he's dirty. He just was in shit. And he's like, okay, well, do you guys have flies on your food and in your homes? And it was that moment where people really started connecting the dots and realized that how gross this was. And they kind of tripped over the truth, as he says. And so it didn't require heavy external intervention. This was actually a community-driven solution where they all agreed after that sort of demonstration that, wow, we need to change these habits and start using these new facilities, or at least going places farther away, because they're causing real health challenges. But sometimes it just takes really walking people through the realities, because we all live in a different reality. Your experiences and your perspective and your thoughts and feelings shape how you see the world and what things mean. And so if you assume everybody else is thinking the same thing, you're going to be dead wrong, because everybody has completely different experiences, completely different ways of looking at stuff. And so sometimes you really need to walk through how stuff comes together and a line of thinking to help people see it in that way. And so for your team, how you can use insight, and again, made up of clarity and compression. So, these are leaving a lasting impression in a quick time frame, tripping over the truth, stretching beyond comfort. So for your team, you can do things like, well, actually, let me start with the products and services first. So for your products and services, you can start with interactive diagnostics, where you try to build a diagnostic tool within your product to help users uncover areas where maybe they are stuck or inefficient. You can think about like Google now automatically calculates how much time you're in meetings on your calendar. You can do customer discovery activities, so you can guide customers through exercises that reveal their pain points. A lot of times when we think about sales, we just kind of tell the customer what we think and why we believe they have a problem. But this is suggesting that actually, if you can find a way to walk them through something, an exercise that reveals these pain points, for instance, maybe a financial planning app, you could show how small changes in spending can create big future savings. Seeing that stuff is really important, and that can create a moment of insight. Another thing you can do for products and services, you can incorporate transformational stories. So sharing customer testimonials, that one seems obvious. A lot of us do that. But stories of transformation through your marketing can be really powerful. And I think we actually underestimate their value and we underdo it because, I don't want to get my customers permission. I don't want to ask them to do things outside of the norm, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, that's actually just fear talking. You're nervous that you're going to disrupt a customer. What you should be doing is really digging into your customers, especially early. And those who have great stories of success, capture those. Because hearing how others achieve success often triggers insight for new customers, right? That's who it's for. And your existing customer is probably going to like the recognition anyways. Because again, people like being asked to share their opinion and their perspective. All right, so we've gone through 2 of the 4 pillars of the power of moments. So these pillars that you can use to create memorable moments for your team and for your products and services, and also your programs, very much for your programs. So pillar number 3 is pride. So recognizing achievements can really create a lot of momentum for people. So just what we're talking about, pride moments, they commemorate achievements and courage, making people feel valued and capable. So these moments are often tied to recognition and meaningful milestones. So the core elements of pride are recognition, so celebrating both the individual and team successes. So recognition should be personal and specific, and I'll get into why I'm emphasizing that. Milestones, so recognition and then milestones, to break long-term goals into smaller milestones, making progress visible and making it rewarding. And then courage, acts of courage, even small ones, they can build confidence and they can also inspire others. So let's talk about each of those and give an example. And so a couple of things they share in the book. So there is this there was this program called Couch to 5K, and it motivated users. These were people who were sort of out of shape, were not exercising regularly, and they wanted to start exercising. Problem is, a lot of exercise programs or doing things like getting gym memberships are really intimidating, and they seem like huge asks. And so instead, this program ended up being called Couch to 5K because it literally broke down the challenge of running a 5K into very, very small achievable steps, which helps the users build confidence through progress and makes them a lot more likely to succeed. So I think it was like something where, the first step is just going from your couch to your mailbox. And you might say, wow, that's a little absurd. But for some people, you need to start somewhere. And if you get into the psyche side of this stuff, stacking wins is one of my favorite concepts. It's this idea, it's like, you just got to start stacking wins. You got to start banking moments of success, because more moments of success create memories of success, which turn into beliefs that you're successful and can be more successful. Our beliefs about what is true in the world and about ourselves are all built on our memories. And so if you're only thinking about memories where you were falling short or you have a deficit, then your belief is most likely limiting you. So instead, you want to build up memories that reinforce the beliefs that you need to succeed. And so Couch to 5K is a great example, and why breaking down long-term goals into smaller milestones can have such a huge impact, because it makes progress a lot more visible and it makes it a lot more rewarding. The second example he gave was a student at a middle school who really loved to sing, and at some point when she was little, I think one person told her to not sing. I think they heard her singing, but it wasn't an appropriate setting or something, and they basically told her, you should not be singing. And so, kids take comments to heart. I mean, you could probably sit here now, if I asked you, remember moments from your childhood that were either extremely encouraging or extremely discouraging. Guarantee we could all come up with some. I know I can. But what happened for this student was there was a music teacher who heard her voice, and her voice was a little bit different. It recognized that her voice was actually beautiful and told her that. Pulled her aside and said, look, your voice is amazing. You need to keep singing. And a small comment like that led to a major boost in her self-esteem and really changed the trajectory of this young girl's life. And it highlights how simple recognition can have such profound effects. So we've talked about pride is our third pillar here. And it's made up of recognition, milestones, and courage. So courage is the last one I'm going to give you an example of. And this one's a historical example. So courage is this idea of not being fearless, because that's nearly impossible, but it's when you experience fear, it's being able to stand in the face of it and actually take acts that are right. And so they did some studies, or they found some studies, I should say, where they found that most people in most situations, they know what the right thing to do is, but they oftentimes don't know how to act in that moment. And so that's why you have a lot of situations where bystanders sit by while something bad is happening, and they know it's bad, but they don't do anything. And it's because you really have to train yourself in what to actually do in those moments. And that's where acts of courage come into play. Now, the example they give, which I think is a perfect one, is the sit-ins at lunch counters during the civil rights movement. Now, hopefully, I'm sure you're familiar somewhat with the civil rights movement and racial equality. But one of the key sort of mechanisms that the movement used were these sit-ins at lunch counters, because back then white people were separated from people of color in different venues. And so what they did was, these black activists and white activists who were pushing for equality, they went into these segregated lunch areas and they sat down at the counters and they refused to leave as a protest. But what's important about them as an example and why they come up here is because these people endured a lot. And actually, if you're in Atlanta ever, you can go to the Center for Civil and Human Rights and do a simulation where you actually get to kind of experience what they experienced, which is wild. It's a really powerful experience. But basically, these people were, once they sat down, they were yelled at, they were pushed, people poured stuff on them. It's pretty horrific. You can still see pictures of it, and I'm sure there's some videos too. But why this comes up here is because anybody who's studied the movement knows that those people who sat at those counters trained before. They went through rigorous training as a group. They taught each other how to use these nonviolent methods of protest. And so the lunch counter sit-ins, they knew they were going to encounter hostility, and their leadership knew that these activists were going to encounter hostility and physical violence. And so what they did was for weeks before they even went and did these things, they rehearsed. So they actually put these people in the situations in private and really just went in on them and kind of tried to simulate what it was going to be like. Because preparing them to take risks by creating safe spaces for failure, and something as intense as that, you definitely need to rehearse. That makes courage in the real moment much easier. And that's why practicing and rehearsing anything really is super, super important, because it prepares your mind and it prepares you emotionally for what's actually going to happen, for arriving at that moment and being able to do what you need to do. That's why professional athletes practice so much. It's because you want to get to a point where it's automatic. In the moment, you do what is necessary automatically, and you're not thinking about it, you're just acting. And so that was a great example of courage, how it's a core element of pride, and being able to act in the face of these circumstances is really, really important. So we're talking about pride, third pillar of creating powerful moments. And now let me give you some suggestions about how to incorporate pride into your products and services, and also maybe into your team. So for your products and services, you can do customer recognition programs. So showcase customer achievements. This can be gamification, this could be case studies, spotlights, public shout outs, even just, small little recognitions. Somebody gets through the first part of your product, or they, hit a milestone in your service, whatever it is, you can showcase them. It doesn't have to be even flashy or like a huge thing, but calling that moment out can really create a memory of pride that turns that interaction into something memorable. Another thing you could do to kind of bring in pride and create a memorable moment for your customers is do progressive milestone tracking. So in your product or in your program, whatever it is, you can include visible progress bars. You could do badges, certificates, checklists, and in the beginning, you can just do these manually, so I do this with some of my programs where somebody completes an exercise. I just like to send them a quick note saying, hey, great job, or, nice work getting this done, and despite your schedule and all these other things. And these things are encouraging, right? Anytime somebody encourages you by recognizing your progress, it's emboldening. So there are a lot of simple ways to do that. And obviously a lot of products and software have taken that into account. You can see why so many restaurants have rewards programs, loyalty programs. And once you hit a certain thing, and it's like, oh my God, you got 10,000 points, you get a free burrito bowl or whatever it is. But the thing is, they work. People like that. And it creates memorable moments. So don't shy away from it if you can fit it in to what you're doing. And then a third thing you could do to utilize pride in your products or services is really recognizing and rewarding courage. So recognize customers who try bold strategies using your product. And so, for instance, you could send thank you notes to early adopters who are taking a risk. You can also follow their work and highlight them even when they're not using your product or service, as a way to say, hey, you matter to us and we're proud to call you a customer. And then for your team, here's a few ideas about how to incorporate pride. So tailoring recognition. So I alluded to this before, but tailoring recognition is really important. We all know that recognition is important, hopefully. And I think it's like 80% of bosses say that they recognize their employees, and only 20% of their employees have ever been recognized, say that they've ever been recognized. So there's clearly a big disconnect between managers and bosses and their teams. But when we say tailored recognition, instead of generic rewards, you want to make recognition personal and meaningful, like giving a team member a reward that's actually tied to their interests and not a public display necessarily. Too often we think, oh, employee of the month, like, all right, well, let's have Johnny stand up or Mary stand up, say, great job, you're the employee of the month, thank you, here's a $5 gift card to Starbucks. But that's so impersonal and ultimately kind of useless. If anything, I would argue that something like that is a negative for team morale and culture, because you're doing lip service to something that actually matters to them. And so if you're not going to think about a gift in recognition or think about a way to recognize someone that's meaningful to them, then why are you doing it? And so think specifically about the person involved and who you're trying to recognize. And you don't have to recognize them in front of everybody. In fact, that doesn't even have that big of a deal. But you want to show something and do something that shows that you know them, that you're paying attention to them, that you're recognizing them, and that you know what would be meaningful to them. Another way you can incorporate pride into your team is to establish multiple finish lines or milestones during projects or during campaigns or whatever. So don't wait until the end of a project or wait until the end of a campaign. Celebrate incremental progress. Celebrate incremental achievements to really keep momentum going. That's why I always tell people, it's like when you get your first customer, that better be a big celebration for you because it's important. It's a big moment. When you get to your 5th customer, when you get to your 10th customer, whatever it is, there's all these, like in TV, you see people like ringing bells for every sale they make. Yeah, that stuff's great, honestly. It's all about motivating, keeping ourselves motivated and turning these mundane things into things that can be memorable, affirming, and energizing. And last thing for your team, you could rehearse courage, similar to what we discussed with civil rights movement. Hopefully you're not in a situation that's that intense, but prepare your team members to take risks by creating those safe spaces for failure during internal projects. So, establish that you want them to push themselves outside of the boundaries, and that'll get them more prepared to do it naturally in the future. Okay, so we've done 3 out of 4. And again, this is all from the book, The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. And what we're talking about are what their research has shown are elements that make certain moments memorable. Pillar 1 was elevation. So really elevating a typical experience and making it one that is different and memorable. So you do that through boosting sensory appeal, raising the stakes, and breaking the script. We talked about insight. So creating moments of insight or aha moments by providing clarity and compression clarity over a short period of time, tripping over the truth. So really leading people all the way from where they are to a completely new revelation, so to speak, and then stretching people beyond their comfort. So pushing them into new situations that really set the stage for self-discovery. And then 3, we just finished with pride. So ways to recognize people or allow people to recognize themselves to help build momentum. And the last pillar here is connection. So another way to create really meaningful moments and memories is connection. Connection moments, they deepen relationships and they build community. So these moments oftentimes involve shared struggles or synchronized experiences and some sort of mutual purpose. So you can think about your own life. What are some of the most memorable experiences? Holidays where the family's all together. A wedding where 2 families come together and everybody has that shared experience. Funerals, same idea. These are memorable celebrations of life where people are together and going through something together. That's really what this is about. And this is about creating a shared sense of purpose that's greater than the individual. And so one example they give in the book is around this healthcare company called Sharp that was really trying to revamp their customer experience. They were getting very bad reviews from their patients in hospitals that they worked. And so what they did was they called their whole team together and they brought them all together in a massive event and had them all recommit to changing the customer experience. They gave them voluntary action teams and they called for improvements to customer care. And these synchronized efforts that they did created a sense of a shared mission. So it helped bond the employees together while improving the organization's customer relationships. So let me break this down a little bit more specifically. So there are 3 core elements to connection. So if you're getting a theme here, each of these pillars has kind of 3 core elements. The core elements for connection are 1, shared struggle. So people bond when they go through challenges together. You could think about people, maybe you went through a really hard course in college or in high school with other people and you guys all kind of bonded over that. You have that shared experience. Maybe you had a really tough coach on an athletics team. Maybe you had a fire drill at work. And I mean that in the company sense, not like a literal fire drill, but you went through a really tough time at work where things were going wrong. Those things really create connection. Another element of connection is synchronized experiences. So these are events or activities that bring people together to deepen emotional bonds. And again, these are where everybody's sharing the experience together. And the third element is purpose. So connecting everybody's efforts to a shared mission. It makes them much more meaningful, and allows them to kind of raise the bar and realize they're a part of something bigger. Everybody is chipping in. Everybody is investing because we all care about this thing. And so there's a couple of elements here that I want to mention as sort of a bonus aspect of connection. So in order to really understand connection, it's also important to understand how relationships work. And this was one of the coolest parts of this book. So I decided to throw this into the fourth pillar. It is in the book, and that's where I'm pulling it from. So they talk about relationships because obviously, connection is about relationships. That's where relationships start. And they reference a psychologist named Harry Reese in the book. And he has researched what actually deepens relationships is what he calls responsiveness. So in order for relationships to deepen and for connections to blossom, you need responsiveness from each other. And so what does that mean? Well, surprise, it consists of 3 elements. So responsiveness in relationships consists of understanding, validation, and caring. So anytime you're trying to actually improve or build a relationship with somebody, be it a partner, be it a spouse, be it a stranger, what you need to do is make sure that there's understanding, validation, and care. And so understanding, what we're talking about is actively listening and showing that you comprehend what the other person is sharing. A lot of times this can just be as simple as repeating back to them kind of what they shared and asking probing questions to dig deeper. Validation is the second piece. So that's where you acknowledge the other person's perspective and you make them feel valued. So if anybody's been in a relationship before, with a significant other, how important this can be. People oftentimes, they want to be heard, they want to be seen, which is another way of saying they want to be validated. So if, a lot of times your partner or your teammate might come to you and recount a situation where somebody treated them a certain way or something didn't go right. And they're looking for you to validate or affirm that their perspective has validity, their perspective has truth to it, that they should feel that way, or it's okay for them to feel that way. That's what validation really is. And relationships must have validation. If you're not validating your partner or your teammate or your co-founder, then I guarantee you there's fractures in your relationship, or at least it's not nearly as strong as it could be and needs to be. So again, we're talking about relationships as a part of how you build connection. Relationships are around responsiveness, which is understanding, validation, and the third one, caring. So this is just simple. It's demonstrating concern and support. This stuff is really crucial for founders, especially co-founders, not only with your relationship with each other, but also your team and your customers, because responsiveness can really strengthen your trust and loyalty. So for instance, customer service is an excellent example where responsiveness is super important. Anytime a customer has a problem, you're providing support, you want to make sure that you show them that you understand what their problem is, recounting back to them what they're saying, validating their feelings. So a lot of times that's just as simple as like, oh, I could see why that'd be really frustrating this is happening. Or I definitely get where you're coming from. That sucks that this didn't work for you. That's really powerful. And then caring, demonstrate concern and support and say, all right, well, I'm here to help you out. We're going to make this right. It might take me a few minutes, but we're going to figure this out together. That's all people want. Every time I've done this in customer support scenarios, it pays dividends. It's that easy. Just understand where they're coming from, validate why they're frustrated or validate their frustrations, and then show some actual care. We've all been on probably customer support calls where we're the customer and you feel like they're not even listening to you. And that stuff can leave a really bad taste in your mouth. So that was our sort of insert here about relationships as a part of this pillar connection. So again, what we're talking about is this book, The Power of Moments, and the principles behind creating really powerful moments by design. How do you actually design memorable moments? We talked about pillar 1, elevation, pillar 2, insight, pillar 3, pride, and now we're in pillar 4, connection. And the elements of connection are really shared struggle, synchronized experiences, and having a collective purpose. And then also understanding how relationships are formed and strengthened by being responsive. So that means understanding, validation, and care. So how can you apply this to your products and services in your team? For your product or service or program, you can do community building. So you can create spaces where customers can connect with each other, like a Facebook group or a Slack channel, or live events. And that allows them to kind of start having shared experiences, right? You can have shared challenges. So you can run customer challenges. Maybe it's like a 30-day improvement plan to foster some connection and struggle. You could use user-generated content. So this encourages customers to share their experiences using your product. And it creates a feedback loop of shared success stories while also giving you a chance to demonstrate your responsiveness, showing them it's like, oh, wow, okay, I see what happened here. Definitely understand why that's frustrating. And I'm glad that you brought it to us because we're going to try to fix this and support you. That's what being vulnerable and creating connection really means. For your team, you can think about doing hackathons or retreats. I know they're still popular in some tech companies. This is just creating shared experience where the team works on a meaningful project or celebrates an accomplishment together. Again, celebrating accomplishments is easy. It's fun. We just oftentimes overlook it because we're so caught up in the day-to-day. But I'm telling you, it pays massive dividends. People need to let off steam. They need social situations with their team where they can talk about or act, take down their professional mask to a certain extent and just kind of be more casual with each other. And that helps strengthen relationships. For your team, you can also really constantly try to reconnect them to the larger mission of what you're doing. One way to do this is, this is a suggestion I give to a lot of people I work with. So if you have like a board, for example, where you have a monthly team meeting, lead those meetings off with some sort of testimonial or video or something highlighting your customer story to really ground everybody in why you were there. Like, what are we doing here? Like, remind everybody if there's something bigger here that we're all here to commit to and reinforce. And then the last thing you can do with your team is honestly just be responsive. So if you're the leader, listen and respond to your team's concerns and suggestions. That fosters trust and validation. You have to be able to listen and change your mind. Too often I see founders, and I used to be this way too, they have a vision for how something needs to go. And so any suggestions or questions to that vision from their team or their board or whoever, what they take those moments as, they view them as moments to, instead of moments to listen and rethink or reconsider, they take them as moments to prove themselves and say, oh, no, I've thought of that. And here's why what you suggest is not going to work. Or yes, I thought of that. Like, you want to prove that they've thought of everything or that, their approach is the best because they're the founder. And if they don't have the vision, then why are they the founder? Like, we have these like weird kind of beliefs built in our heads about what a founder or a leader needs to be. A leader needs to be someone who helps establish direction and keeps people motivated and productive and effectively reaching goals. It does not mean you have to be the visionary. It certainly does not mean you should have every answer. In fact, if you're trying to have every answer, you're probably not a very good leader. Responsiveness is a great way to remind yourself that, like, my team is there for a reason. They want to succeed. I want to succeed. Leverage your team by listening, validating, and understanding and caring about what they have to say. Okay, so that's it. The 4 pillars: elevation, insight, pride, connection. I know we went through a lot. It's been a really jam-packed book breakdown, but I want to kind of bring it all together by having you imagine a product or a program experience where onboarding is an adventure. Each milestone is celebrated, and users have aha moments that really keep them hooked. As founders, we don't just build products or programs. We shape customer journeys. So by integrating elevation and insight and pride and connection, you're not just meeting customer needs, you're creating memories they'll remember and talk about. Now, you don't have to try to hit all 4. You can just try to hit 1 or 2. They say it really only takes 1 or 2 to make something memorable. So think about, what's the next defining moment you'll create, either for your team or your customers or yourself. Are you boosting sensory appeal? Are you adding surprise and breaking a script? Are you creating meaningful milestones, maybe with your product or in your program? I'd really love to hear what you come up with. So definitely drop me a message or comment or send me a note on LinkedIn with your ideas. But truly take this and think deeply about it. Don't rush into the first idea you have, but just start jotting them down and use these principles and reach out if you need help. We've got extra resources to help you do that. But using these principles can really help you take a program or a product or service from being something that is useful to something that is memorable. And that sometimes can be the difference between a sound business and a big business, or a product that people feel okay about versus a product that people love, or a company that people love and rave about. And so that's how we're going to close this out. Again, this was a book breakdown, part of our Founder Underground podcast. The book is The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. They've also written some other great books that I'll probably dive into in future podcasts. Hopefully you found this useful, valuable. To all my founders and early stage entrepreneurs and leaders out there, we're here to bring you resources that are tactical, practical, and help you stay ahead of the game and engaged. And so thank you so much for tuning in, and let's get back out there and keep building the future.